Hello and welcome to the Patty Pod, Season 2, Episode 16. Welcome to the greatest podcast in the multiverse. We were cruising along. It's Super Sunday today. I did watch the first half of the Super Bowl. It was a bit underwhelming. I skipped the halftime show. Usher is not my favorite. Kind of feels like I don't know. He's a little past his prime. And not quite far enough past it for a fun, nostalgic episode or session. So I skipped Usher. Hope he did well. But not my cup of tea. Had to jump in the shower, get my weekly shave in, and wanted to do the podcast. So, sorry, Usher. You didn't make it this time. Maybe next time. It's been a couple weeks since my last episode. Got a little busy. Had kind of some long weeks, to be honest. Just kind of had some challenges. Sort of a lot, sort of draining. I think some of it might be the depths of winter that we're in now. With less light than the summer and the cold. It's getting a little bit warmer here, but January can be a little tough, early February, but one day at a time, and all in all, I can't complain too much. I was reflecting on things I should be grateful for last week, and immediately came up with a number of items which I sort of was embarrassed that I hadn't been thinking about. So I sometimes am uncomfortable with the gratitude talk. Sometimes it feels like I'm trying to deny my feelings, but I definitely see some upside to it. I do think where you focus can determine a great deal of your emotional state, and it can be good to do that, to just tick off that list. Count your blessings, as we used to say. Went to the new museum today. That was an experience. I've been going to a museum every weekend. I do a thing called Culture Pass, where if you have a library card, you're able to go to a website and essentially get a free ticket. A number of the big New York institutions, cultural institutions, participate in the program. And it's great. So I've been able to do that, and I even took a day off of hockey, so it's important to me. It seems like I need a little break. I was getting a little too much hockey, not enough culture, and I wanted to restore the balance. I also need a little break, just physically. I don't think it's an aging thing. I think it's more of a scheduling thing. I've been playing hockey Friday nights for a while now, but in the past maybe 2 years, I've been going out with my friends after, and it's a late night on Friday. I'm usually not in bed till 2 a.m. And Gunther keeps his regular 6 a.m. wake-up hour. So Kate usually feeds him, but I'm kind of awake during that. So it can be a little bit much to play then on Saturday and Sunday. So I usually take a day and either watch some of my niece and nephew's basketball games, or head to a museum. So I went to the new museum today. They had a large, I guess they were calling it not a retrospective, an introspective of the artist Judy Chicago, but it was a large exhibition or show of her work. Her 6-decade career. She was a seminal feminist philosopher, artist, I should say, but she probably could be considered a philosopher as well. She was quite scholarly and researched the contributions of many overlooked women intellectuals, writers, and artists. And her most famous piece is one called Dinner Party. It's like a triangular installation that's kind of got place settings, does have place settings, and the plates and I think some of the other material commemorate various notable women in the arts and the humanities. And that's kind of how I knew her work. Of course, she did a great deal of other work, and that's kind of what I learned about today. She was trained as, I think she was in art school, and she was sort of trained in this minimalist style. She was working in the minimalist movement in the early 70s and late 60s, and that was, like most 20th century art, dominated by men. And she found even the formal language of it to be masculine and constraining, and she wrote a lot. In a lot of her pieces, she would have texts that accompanied the image, often in a cursive script. And she wrote a lot about feeling like she was covering up something that with the form. It was covering. It was. She was hiding something of herself with this formalist language that was often very rational and geometric. And you could see through her work, she sort of narrated this change where she kept drawing these images that were symbolic of the vagina, and it was the only way that she knew how to capture what she was trying to express, and she felt embarrassed by this, and her professors and I think some of her art dealers and other people in the art world were criticizing her for these images, and even her own husband, who was very supportive of her, didn't like some of these early work. And so she described this whole process, and it was kind of a fascinating thing how you could see through her own writing how some of these images formed, and then you could see them transform, like the one, it was sort of in this Georgia O'Keeffe style where it wasn't a real, photorealistic depiction of a vagina, but these kind of general images that could be seen as flowers or, other sort of abstract shapes, but clearly had a certain shape that suggested the vagina. And then some of it would morph into a butterfly, and some of it morphed into other shapes. And this was getting at, sort of through that, getting to, I guess, some sort of femininity that she was trying to celebrate. So she went on in her career and also brought in focus on all things feminine, especially things feminine that were marginalized by the art world, like crafts and certain color. And there was a lot more about the body. There was a lot more about repression and violence. And it was interesting. It was a large body of work. And she worked across different media, and painful struggles throughout her life, crude treatment by some men, and by the art world. And, what can you say? But that she triumphed. I'm not somebody that uses that term a lot. Try not to think about life too dramatically. I've talked a bit before about how I'm sort of attracted to sort of Eastern ways of thought somewhat because of the lack of drama. But there is drama in life to some degree. And, I saw a photo of her. Sitting in front of some of her work, and she looked different than I expected her to look. She looked more joyful, and she had kind of a shine to her. She was sort of coiffed and sort of maybe made up a little bit, and she kind of had a sort of shine about her, which I took to mean that at some point in the later part of her life, if not earlier, she sort of rode a wave of success and a wave of triumph. So I love to see that. I talked a little bit about the Japanese artist. I'm going to botch her name, but I think it's Yayoi Kusama. I need to look that up because I feel bad for not knowing that exactly. She was a Japanese artist. She's quite famous now. She has a big mural. Yes, Yayoi Kusama. And she had a lot of her ideas essentially stolen in the 20th century by other artists that were pop artists, and I think maybe Oldenburg stole some of her ideas or heavily borrowed. And that's not necessarily, I don't know that for sure, but it seemed like she was doing some of these soft sculptures before he was, and he had a partner that he worked with that didn't get a lot of credit either. And she had Kusama had a lot of mental health problems. She was institutionalized for a while, and to see her celebrated, is gratifying for me. So I don't mean this, I think maybe it sounds like I'm looking for points. People call it virtue signaling online when you make some of these points that try to make you look good. And, I don't, as a man, I'm not trying to show how much of a feminist I am, but I do, clearly there was, injustice towards certain people in many institutions, and the art world was not immune to that. And, it's good to see courses corrected, and that has started to happen. And so anyway, yeah, it's good to see people feel gratified, and I'm always going to be in favor of that. And that goes for men too. I want to see men succeed, and I want to see men feel gratified, and men feel like they've found a path to success and to fulfillment, to self-actualization, and or some kind of harmony, however that looks, whether it's big and public like a retrospective at a major museum in a major city, or in some less public way. But that's what I'm looking for everybody. So that was cool. I had an interesting moment at the end of my visit. I started towards the top floors. Well, I'll just say one thing. I walked into one floor on one of the galleries, and I expected to walk into a white wall gallery with artwork hanging and sculptures in the middle of the floor like I normally do. And as soon as the elevator doors open, it was this wall-to-wall purplish carpet with a floral pattern at some parts of it. And the walls, I think, were painted a sort of, if I remember, it's kind of a rose color. And there were these big partitions, so it didn't just feel like a box. And this was part of the exhibition where I think Judy Chicago herself curated this particular space, this particular gallery. And it basically was an homage to notable women artists and intellectuals and writers of the past. There were some Emily Dickinson poems. There was some Frida Kahlo work. There was some work from Nora, I'm going to botch her name too, which is really embarrassing. The writer, I'll get it. I'm forgetting right now off the top of my head. I'll get it before I get off this topic. But just a number of different notable female artists, and it was fun to see. And the thing that it was Zora Neale Hurston. Sorry, I always get her name wrong. Zora Neale Hurston. Some of a film of that she had taken actually of Black people at some kind of a social gathering. There were a bunch of like girls that were dancing, and there was like a group singing and dancing, and then there was a girl that was just on a rocking chair, and she was rocking, and there were a couple other notable female artists that were included, and there were these enormous banners that looked like some kind of textiles, like maybe a quilting, maybe a quilt or some kind of a textile that was hanging. And she had posed a question, what would happen or how would things be if women ruled the world? And then there were a number of other questions that were posed on similar banners. Would there be private property? Would there be equal parenting? Would there be violence? I think maybe would there be war? These kind of questions. I had a sort of a long internal response to that, part of me felt like the question that's more interesting to me is what if femininity rose in prominence? What if people were less aggressive? What if people were more peaceful? Those things are associated with femininity, I think, in our culture. And what if people were more loving? What if people were more joyful, more trusting? But because we've so closely identified femininity with female bodies and women, I think, in fact, if women were in charge, that it would be a big difference. And, it seems like we don't have to have femininity necessarily so aligned with females, but I think that it is. And so if we, at this point in human consciousness, it is pretty, not totally, there's been big changes in that regard. And it's not, sometimes the net result isn't so sort of, maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? Hippy-dippy. Sometimes the incorporation of femininity into male lives or lives of people who identify as men is just chilling out, which maybe there's more of when that happens. But in any case, I think it was interesting. The space, though, was what I really reacted to, because when those elevator doors opened, it was this purple and pink, and it looked like almost like a 90s living room, and it just felt completely different. I was like, whoa, like immediately it was like, what a gesture, what a kind of move to make. I hear a lot of talk about the white walls of the museum and the problem, like this idea that that's what neutral is. I mean, people have often kind of criticized that idea, like, white is not a neutral thing. White walls are not necessarily nothing. They're a point of view. And I totally get it. I agree with that. And so I like when museums or galleries do something different. And so that was really stood out to me with these big banners hanging and this purple carpet and these pink or lavender walls. It just felt so different. Anyway, I'll say one last thing about my time there, which was that I went down to the basement to the last gallery to see, and when I got down there was a woman. There was just like a hallway. There was like two hallways that were perpendicular to each other, and when you got down to the bottom, there was just kind of a long hallway that extended to the left, and there was two banks of elevators, and there was two video screens hanging. And I got down there, and I saw this model standing at the far end, this tall, thin woman who was dressed in, you could see pretty like, I don't know how to put this, a dressy kind of a long gown. And there was a man dressed in black standing next to her. And then he was on his phone. And then immediately he opened the door and another model walked out. And the first model walked in. And the model walked down toward me and walked past me into this other hallway where there was a guy also dressed in black, and he was immediately talking to her. And I said to the security guard, there was a security guard down there, I'm like, is this a fashion show? And she's like, it looks like it. And I just thought it was so strange that she didn't know what was going on and that there'd be a fashion show sort of walking through a gallery. So I was very intrigued. And I went down a little bit further towards the man who was on his phone, who was opening the door. And there was a tray with empty glasses on it. And, there was a couple of benches there because this was a little like gallery space. And there were some video screens, so you could sit in the bench and watch the video art. But I got down there and I said, is this a fashion show? And he's like, well, kind of. He said, for one person. I thought, well, that's strange. I said, oh, is it a buyer? And he said, yes. And I said, oh, okay. So the other model came back, and that other man walked her down, and he was making these little adjustments, as she was just about to leave and go into this little theater. So the door opens, and she goes in, and the other model comes out. And I I talked to the man again and I said, "Oh, the next time you open the door, can I just stand here and look?" And he said, "No." And I thought that was kind of strange that, I couldn't, like, that was still a part of the gallery, kind of, and I couldn't be there because this Wizard of Oz figure inside could not see me, some stranger off the street. I guess that would be a faux pas of some type. So I stayed for a while and I watched the models go back and forth and the man sort of adjust. And a little later, I heard they were taking a break. And then two women came out and the models were tall and skinny. That hasn't changed, which kind of surprised me. I just seen this entire exhibition about feminism and the female body and what it's, the socially constructed female body and all the layers of socialization around women and women's bodies. And then there's this fashion show with these clearly underfed young women. And then in any case, these two other women came out. They were like middle-aged. They were also really thin. And they were, in very tailored, like, kind of suits. They were kind of fashiony. I think everyone was wearing black other than the models. And I heard this one woman was talking to then there were these two other guys that came that must have been associates of the designer. And they were really skinny, too. And they were in black. And the one woman was talking to the other woman and the two men that I just described and was telling them that the buyer, she thought this was something and this was a mechanism for something else, and how this woman was saying I was afraid at first that she wouldn't like that meant she wouldn't like the clothes, but she didn't. She went on to say blah blah blah. I couldn't really hear the whole thing, and the guys were like, "Well, she would be straightforward if she had negative opinions, correct?" And the woman's like, "Oh yes, I've known her since childhood," and so there was this whole thing going on, and the door opened, and then like two or three more staff people came out that looked like kind of like a crew on a movie set, dressed like a little more casually and a little scruffier, and they were in like jeans and stuff. And I was like, all of these people, I don't know, I think there was between the designers and his associates and the models and these other women that were somehow related to the buyer and the kind of the crew, it was probably 10, 12 people all for this buyer to see these clothes from one designer. Anyway, that was kind of interesting. That was a little New York moment, I felt like, and I was a little fly on the wall to capture it. So that was my day at the New Museum. Let's move on to the essay corner. I know that was a long one. I hope you're still with me. I hope the juice was worth the squeeze on that one. I hope it was worth the long walk that we took there. All right, so let's go into the essay. This is from the summer again. The new place I visited today was a medical imaging center known as Optum. I was there for an x-ray as the knee I sprained some 2 months prior playing ice hockey had not healed. It turned out to be next door to the new urgent care I had visited in July. Apparently, this is a little medical district among the self-storage buildings, minor industry, and modest homes. The space was a very nondescript-looking clinic, looking something like an office building from the outside. It was a bit brighter and more modern than I expected, with a new broad reception desk of light-colored wood with a bit of stainless steel framing. The drop ceiling and floor tiles all looked modern and clean, but the large cracks in the vinyl seats betrayed the age or perhaps financial position of the company. Overall, though, the shape of the place gave me confidence in their competency. I arrived at 8 p.m., happy to do so as I'm still on summer break and in the middle of a week where I cannot read, watch TV, use social media, or listen to the radio or podcast. This is a part of a creativity program I am doing, and the thinking is overuse of those things distracts us from experiencing the world around us, limiting our creativity. The first night I felt the sting of withdrawal and understood the point of the exercise. The first night I played a little guitar, then ended up writing on my phone, laying on my side on top of my bed, halfway to the fetal position. The second night, I played even less guitar and attempted a workout. I fell asleep not once but twice mid-workout, though I did eventually finish it. Giving up caffeine was easier than this, much easier. I'm writing now as I sit in the waiting room and glad I can do so because the wait, a half an hour at this point, would otherwise feel interminable. I did, however, like arriving. I think it speaks to the loneliness that can hit me at night, especially this week. My wife Kate has been watching TV, so I've been by myself in the other room. It's not a sad or intense loneliness, more of a boring one. For some reason, I had flashbacks of going to a place like this with my mom when I was a kid, and then I had a mental image play out of seeing us as a family friend, of us seeing a family friend and doctor and chatting. I guess that was what I was feeling when I came in, a sense of being out and about with the possibility of running into a friend, even though the likelihood of that is very near zero in this neighborhood. Part of me is just more settled that night, and I think I did just like seeing other people at night in a calm space while not being rushed. Filled with conservative Orthodox Jews, immigrant Latin Americans, and Bangladeshi Muslims, it's a humble neighborhood, but safe and pretty quiet. I can zone out pretty easily and was doing so there just prior to writing. I noticed that looked like a Juan Muro print and appreciated that someone tried to make the space more cheerful. I enjoyed hearing the low, white noise hum of either the ventilation system or the vending machines. Against virtual silence, it's kind of soothing and reminded me of similar quiet places I'd been as a kid. I used to be embarrassed by this proclivity to zone out, but now I treasure it. It's kind of a meditation for me. Hey, I was talking to my dad about listening to music and podcasts. This was a while ago, and he was mentioning the importance of silence for him. I do think silence is important. Now, you're probably thinking it's time for me to turn to the spiritual corner, but nope. I was just remembering that conversation about silence, and then I immediately turned on my own podcast. How is that for a spiritual meditative person who gains emotional distance from his own thoughts? Having these online influencers doing ads these days is bringing me back to middle school. I'm having flashbacks. It's like suddenly millions of very amateur actors are thrust before us. We live in a van with our 2 cats and use auto ship from Chewy. We love how easy it is to use and how it keeps us hearting our pets. We heart you, Chewy. That's what I hear. It's the intonation of a middle school theater production. Speaking of intonations and cadence, I was thinking about the news the other day, newscasters. I can't believe they still do the newscaster voice. It seems so out of place these days, especially in this online world where people are doing these very kind of casual podcasts like myself. You know, I turned on the other night, it's like, Bill, new slang is all the trend with young people today who say Discord is bussin', no cap. Janine, is there any way for parents and teachers to understand what is spoken? Well, Bill, there is a way. I myself have joined many of these online forums, and I even think some young people have caught feels for me because of my clout. It just sounds like straight out of the 70s to me. I don't know. Maybe other people are... Maybe it sounds normal to everybody else. It sounds weird to me. Hey, I eat home fried potatoes on the weekend. On weekend brunches, I make them myself. And I try to eat a lot so that I don't have to have lunch too. It's getting out of hand though. I mean, some of it is my nerdy attempt at time management. Like I'm saying, I try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, breakfast and lunch. And that's driven by FOMO often. Like I don't want to have to take time out of my day to go have lunch. I want to just be able to go do stuff because I'm always trying to chase something, I think, sometimes. But it's also part of my very Irish stereotypical love of potatoes. Sometimes I call myself Patty Potatoes. And my sister-in-law, I think she liked that too much, that joke. So I had to kind of reel that back in. Shout out, by the way, Joanna, if you're listening, if you've made it this far. She started listening recently. Shout out. Thanks for listening. She was sort of surprised that I mentioned the niece and nephew, but love those guys. What can I say? Got to see him again this weekend. I'll get back to that in a minute. So, in any case, I usually eat you can get a whole baking sheet, like a cookie sheet, you know? I'll put a whole one of those with potatoes and make it, and I realize it is getting out of hand, though, because I have to stop and take a little break midway through. And it's not even so much that I'm full. It's more that I'm tired. So that's something. That's a new one. Gotta take a break because I'm worn out. from all that potato, all those potatoes. I got to the Guggenheim last weekend, I think it was, maybe 2 weeks ago. One of the spaces I like best in the Guggenheim, this beautiful kind of modern contemporary art museum in New York, pretty famous. It's got a unique and kind of, iconic spiral in the middle that is a gallery that sort of spirals up about 6 or 7 stories, gently curving upward, and the walls are covered with art. You know, it's like when I went, it was the sort of the temporary exhibition that was there, which was cool. It was a lot about, I think it wasn't called night. The title didn't have something to do with night, but it was sort of like darkness, and it was a lot about black artists working in ways that either obscure the figure to highlight how they've been overlooked and marginalized, or like a hidden figure. I think it was called Hidden Figures, about how it's also like that can represent a hiding for protection. So there was a lot of pretty like powerful stuff. There was some cool, some work with hoodies that stood out to me, and work with black hair that stood out to me, and it was good. It was there was a lot to take in, but one of the things I liked best about my visit there was the cafe. They have these rooms that kind of jut out from the spiral, and the cafe is one. It kind of cuts away as you're sort of spiraling your way up, and it just kind of, it was an unexpected highlight. Sometimes it reminded me of how the kitchen can sometimes be the best place to be at a party. You can even be in kind of a opulent home or a well-appointed home, and that has these, you know, wonderful furnishings in a living room or a dining room, or you know, and everyone's in the kitchen. And it's just, for whatever reason, that's where this energy is. That's where this warmth is. So it kind of felt like that in the cafe. It has kind of some conviviality. It had these lower ceilings, and the whole building has got a very like 50s, I think maybe 40s. I don't know when exactly it was built, but it's starting to look like kind of aging modernism. You know, it's almost looks like there's elements you couldn't reproduce because they're so particular to that time period. I'm thinking about like some of the, just like the metal trim and things. So it had these low ceilings that made it feel kind of like a hidden away little section of the building, and kind of cozier and inviting. And it had these curving, undulating walls. The windows were really unique. They had a kind of nouveau modernism to them, and there was this curved walkway that had this kind of pillar, and it was in such a space that you couldn't really tell. Like, the gap between the pillar and this curved wall was just this distance, just this width, that it was unclear if you were supposed to walk through it or not. And I just loved it. It was like almost nowhere do you see that, because I think everybody is thinking about efficiency all the time and clarity. And if whimsy ever gets in the way of that, you know, it's gone. It gets overruled because people don't want to have to deal with issues of, you know, of other people not knowing where to be or how to act. So I love that. That one little space was unique, and it tickled my fancy. What can I say? And so I liked the Guggenheim Cafe. When I was there, I saw a mother and her son were kind of tucked away in the corner of this cozy little space. Looked like they were having a coffee or a donut or something, or a piece of cake or a scone. And the kid looked like he was 15-ish. And I saw him, he put a nice kind of comforting touch on his mom's shoulder. And he looked kind of athletic too. And so I was just, I was surprised by it, because I think maybe I'm remembering myself or other boys that were 15 and feel like you didn't have those moments very often. And it was kind of moving. So I thought that was a little bit of sweetness to see in the cafe. I had some encounters with scent. That can be a powerful thing for me. I just caught a whiff. I think it was Chanel No. 5 of some older women walking past me. And there was also this European family that had like older middle-aged parents who were with their kind of younger adult daughter, and there wasn't even a perfume, I should say, or a cologne. I think it was maybe just like a soap or a shampoo or something, or even a detergent from clothes that I smelled. But it had this kind of, maybe it was just because it was different. I think they were European, Spanish or French, and maybe I'm smelling something that I don't normally smell, but it had kind of like a floral or a vanilla or a sandalwood smell, and both of those instances just like transformed the kind of emotional tone of the space. The one with the older women made me feel like it was even more of an elegant and refined space that I was in. It was more cultivated, and when I had the European family, the man seemed very gentlemanly in his manner and his appearance. I guess his clothing and his body language. He kind of moved out of the way for me in this elegant way and kind of excused himself as he did it. And all this together made me feel like almost like I knew them and like they were friends, like family friends or something, and that they liked me or they had kind of a fondness, which was crazy how my mind went all the way there just from body language and scent. But it can be really powerful for me. Speaking of scent, I've had the same bottle of cologne, the same type I wear, Eau Sauvage from Dior. When I was in Spain once in my 20s, I spent like 2 hours in a shop that had cologne, and I tried a bunch of different ones until I finally found one that I liked. So it feels like I have a signature scent. I know I don't wear it enough probably for that to be the case, but because it's the only cologne I've worn, I do sort of have that idea, and just having that idea makes it feel kind of glamorous. So that's my my experience with scent. I think maybe I'll try to wear it more often. I saw a guy on Instagram who's like the scent master or something. He goes around and takes selfies with people. He's kind of odd. He looks like kind of a playboy, and but he'll just be like, some people apparently will stop him and he'll be like, oh yeah, quick selfie. He'll do a quick selfie and he'll be like, oh, what are you wearing? And he'll say, oh yes, this is quite lovely or something. He'll give them a little feedback. He's like, when did you apply? Well, it's a bit strong. He does these drive-by consultations. He's sort of, I don't know the Salt Bae very well, this chef that likes to be all over the place on Instagram, but he reminds me of that, kind of the scent bae, I guess. I've talked a little bit about the news earlier. I'm going to just talk about the news a little bit more. It feels like it's more depressing to me these days. And, I think I don't know. I try to, especially the local news, it's always about like shootings and killings. It's like kind of terrible. And there's some part of me that thought it would get, I don't know where this came up. I was like worried that it would get worse. Not that there'd be more of these terrible crimes, but that they would somehow just be like more dreadful. And when I had that thought, what came to mind about how they could be more dreadful is if there was a Mean Girl element added to it. I was waiting to hear something like, 2 men are held in custody after stabbing another man tonight and apparently telling him that, quote, no one really liked him anyway. More at 10. Or, tonight, a man shot in a robbery and told he was not much to look at. Tonight at 11. I think that really would. That would be. I hope that never happens. That to me would be just a deeper level of depression at the state of affairs. Even though I think the state of affairs aren't that bad. It's, I guess that's debated. But the news can make things seem much worse than they really are. All right, I'm going to go to emotions. I'm going to talk a little bit about emotions. This really dawned on me. I was on the subway writing about this. I think they have an outsized role for me. If they're not the primary part of my reality, I try not to reduce things to just one explanation or one kind of thought or framework. But I don't know. It seems like my emotional experience is the primary mode of my experience in the world. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people. I think in some ways our society, for lack of better words, chases highs. But in sort of serious society, which we all partake in, we can have a hard time acknowledging them. Like, I rarely hear about talk of emotion in certain milieux, especially like the more male dominated ones. But I often think about how we use the term mental health, in some, I guess in some milieus and at some times, but it's pretty widely used. Even in the hockey world, there's been this hashtag. I think it's Bell something, I'm forgetting now. Bell Let's Talk or something was the thing that was going around for a while. So yeah, in many different areas of life, there's this talk of mental health, but we can barely get ourselves to say emotional health, which has always kind of stood out to me. Even when we're talking about this difficult issue, it's this thing that can be difficult, we say mental health. And I think that's another sign of the difficulty we have with talking about it. We conflate these two. I think people talk about emotional health and mental health like they're the same thing. Even though, to me, it's pretty clear that mental health is about thinking and emotional health is about feeling, which are two pretty distinct experiences in life, I think. But I do think some of it's maybe, particular to me, this kind of primacy of the emotions. But I do think it does definitely apply to everyone to some degree. I think about how I interact with emotions, and I have this author, Anita Moorjani, that I talk about a lot, and there's a lot of other authors that I like. I've been reading Rick Rubin's book about creativity. I think it's called The Creative Act. I read most of that before I had to return it digitally to the library, but I will finish it soon. And anyway, authors like that often talk about using your emotions as a guide. And I really believe in that, and I've gotten better at that. I trust when my calmer self is telling me that I've done what I need to do, and then choosing what to do based on what I really want to do. But there's often this turbulence that I have to ride out and accept. And so it's double-edged. Emotions are kind of double-edged, if not multifaceted for me. I think of them as guides and gargoyles. I've been told that we can learn from the negative emotions, that the gargoyles can be guides too. And this has been difficult for me sometimes, because it seems like I've taken big leaps of faith. I've majored in this impractical discipline of philosophy and moved away from my home state and changed careers in my late 30s, and I still have these bouts of anger and even fear. And the answer I've heard to such a point or objection is that the emotions are telling me to love myself more. And the best way I can interpret that, and recently I've kind of come to this, is that can mean to take the pressure off myself. Especially when it's clear that I've shown great, concern or effort or analysis and even openness, if I've been open on a particular issue or project. And that is one really important thing that I've learned about a lot of people. Like, you'll hear them saying that love is the answer to everything, and some people talk about self-love, especially in like personal growth literature, and I kind of didn't know what that meant for a long time. I think I do kind of speak up and generally like myself, but I think you have to kind of hone in on it. And for me, that has meant taking pressure off myself, accepting that other people are going to be disappointed with me, even after I've given a great effort and given it my all, essentially. So that was an interesting insight that I had into myself. And I think that is a big thing for a lot of people, is to kind of interpret what that means, how love can be the answer in their particular case. So that was helpful for me. I kind of came up with when I thought about this, like really sort of integrating this into my life, I've thought of the sacraments of the Catholic sacrament. I have a sacrament of treat yourself, which is kind of a fun phrase that came out of this show, Parks and Rec. And for me, it was, it's playing hockey and listening to music and eating pizza. But it's also just as important. Like, that's kind of the obvious thing, I think, when people think about self-care or self-love, doing these things they like to do. Go to the spa or have a girls' brunch or whatever it is. But for me, just as important, maybe more important than those things, is to take the pressure off, like I mentioned, to really just say, you know what, like, if I've done my best, what else can I do? So I hope that's helpful. I'm calling that, instead of treat yourself, release yourself. So there's treat yourself and release yourself. Hashtag release yourself. You can credit that to me. We'll make that viral. And I found a little anthem for that, kind of, from a Radiohead song that I like called House of Cards. They sing in it, they go, forget about your house of cards, and I'll do mine. And I'm taking that to mean that we shouldn't try to please everyone with some inherently flawed attempt at perfection, some house of cards of perfectionism. All right, so I hope that everyone is well. Hope you guys had a good week, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace and love.